Hi everybody, so today's video was inspired by the current STI surge in Gauteng. I don't know what you people are doing in Gauteng, but yeah, that and also the fact that on the 4th of March there is an the 4th of March is an HPV awareness day. So I thought I should do a video on HPV, discussing it, breaking it down, and just like helping you guys understand some important information and facts around this particular virus that you can take out into the world and implement in your own life. So yeah, if you are new to my channel, my name is Tandy. I'm a medical scientist and I make the findings of medical research, or essentially what's happening in that side of the world, I make them accessible to you so that you could actually implement them in your own life. I'm very big on practicality and things actually, like how do things translate into the real world? You know, like here's the data or here are the results, but like then what do we do with it in the real world? And essentially that's what I try to do in my channel, to add a bit of practicality into things or into findings from that side of the world so that people can actually use this information in a practical way that helps them make informed decisions around their health. So today's topic is a little close to my heart. I did my master's in a research lab that primarily focused on sexual and reproductive health. And yeah, like they do a lot of fascinating stuff. They still do. I was involved in a clinical trial that was just like honestly like fascinating, you know, testing out things that should be tested. I feel like I'm not giving you enough information on this, but yeah, essentially the work that they do, I like that it translates into the world. It informs policy, health policy in the country. So yeah, I really enjoyed my time there. And so today's topic is kind of like linked to that side of me. As someone who studied medical virology, I felt like, yeah, this is one that I absolutely should do. And so yeah, I'm gonna be talking a little bit about HPV in our video. So HPV stands for Human Papillomavirus. So as the name suggests, it's a virus, and it's a virus that is sexually transmitted. It's an STI because you get it through sexual interactions. And essentially this virus can cause warts. I think these are commonly known as genital warts, but the thing is I'm calling it just warts here because they can happen in many parts of your body, right? Not just in the genital area. So it can cause such things, but it can also cause different types of cancers. So it's one of the most common STIs, and it has multiple strains. Like it has a lot of strains, over 100 strains. I think currently it's like 150 to 200 strains that have been identified that are HPV strains. If you guys remember, like COVID strains, yeah, this is kind of similar as well. Like viruses generally will have different strains. So the HPV virus has over 100 strains. But the thing is, there are some of the strains of HPV are more dangerous than others. And those strains, for instance, are HPV 16 and HPV 18, and these are dangerous because they are the leading causes of cervical cancer. And then there are other two strains that are considered to be low risk strains, and what they do is they typically will cause 90% of the genital warts, and they also will cause minor abnormal cells in the cervix. So if you don't remember what a cervix is like, it's the opening of your uterus, their uterus. Not everyone has a uterus. So a cervix is an opening of the uterus. So the uterus / womb. And yeah, so usually there are cells there in the cervix that if they start being a bit abnormal, it's usually because of having HPV or certain strains of HPV, because not all strains of HPV will cause genital warts or will cause cervical cancer. So HPV, as mentioned, it's a sexually transmitted infection. So you will get it through intercourse, and it's not just like through one type of intercourse. So you can get HPV through vaginal intercourse, through anal intercourse, or through oral sex. Yeah, oral sex as well can result in you getting the virus. Hence earlier I mentioned that the warts that you can get warts. Ooh, American accents. Warts. Yes, they're not just in the genital area, but they can also be in other parts of your body, because through oral sex can get this virus as well. So essentially what happens is that it spreads through close skin to skin touching, like during sex. And a person with, if you have HPV, even if you don't have symptoms, you can still pass the infection to someone else. So that is nothing that you need to be mindful of, because some people will not have the symptoms for HPV, but they can actually still transmit the virus to you. And also, if you are sexually active, what happens is, in some people, you don't get symptoms until like years later. So the issue with this is that it can make it very difficult to know when you first got it, or to even know who gave it to you, right? And yeah, I mean, that can be frustrating, especially if like you want to try and determine if your partner is cheating or whatnot. So yeah, that's the one of the few downsides of having this type of virus. And the thing about HPV is that it goes away. Like in most of the people that contract HPV, it actually goes away. But the problem is, in some people, it doesn't go away because of a lot of other factors. Like maybe if you're immune compromised, especially like, let's say you have, because like there are different types of immune system issues, right, or diseases. But also like one of the ones that people know about is HIV, because it compromises your immune system. So in people that are immune compromised, you find that HPV doesn't go away. And that's when it becomes a problem. Because if it doesn't go away, then it can result in genital warts or other types of warts, or it can result in cancer. And it doesn't only cause cervical cancer, right? It can cause cancer of the vagina, the vulva, penile cancer. So this is cancer on your penis. It's not just a woman's problem. Men can get HPV. It can cause anal cancer, right? Especially like in populations where like MSMs, men who have sex with men. So that is also a concern. It can cause throat cancer. So like cancer in the back of your throat, the oropharyngeal part of your body, oropharynx. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, like it can cause cancer there as well, oral cancer. So that is when it actually becomes a problem, because then obviously now you have to deal with cancer from something that was possibly preventable and could have actually maybe been taken care of in its early stage. So because technology, medicine, and science evolve, what I like these days is that there's so many ways of being able to tell if you do have HPV, or maybe if you've had it already. So like one of the leading, or the most well-known way of screening for HPV was through a pap smear. A pap smear essentially is that they're screening for cervical cancer. So they're taking like the cells in the cervix, and then they analyze them to see if they are abnormal, if they're multiplying in a way that they shouldn't be multiplying. So pap smear is one of the most common ones, but obviously for a lot of people, a pap smear, I know for me, I do not like pap smears. They're invasive, and they use that metal silver thing that's very cold, So yeah, like it's uncomfortable, it can be invasive. And the thing is, sometimes pap smears don't actually detect abnormal cells, or it doesn't detect all of them. It can be a little less accurate. So as a result, you're usually told that you need to repeat it, I think every 2 to 3 years. So pap smears can be, if you're over 21 or if you're sexually active, you need to be getting pap smears regularly. You can get a pap smear from a medical doctor. You can get it from like a GP, from a gynecologist. I know some pharmacies as well in South Africa where you can get pap smears as well. So yeah, they're really not difficult to get. I think in the public sector as well. So government clinics, for instance, I'm pretty sure they do pap smears as well. I don't see why they wouldn't. There are gynecologists that work there. There are GPs that are in the public sector. So I'm sure you can also get it from there. So if you know you're sexually active, guys, get a pap smear, right? Okay. So there's another way of knowing if you have HPV or not. And these are like new methods. Well, okay, this one is not so new. It's called a liquid-based cytology sampling method. You don't really need to know the name. It can only be done by a healthcare professional. So essentially it's less invasive compared to a pap smear, and they just like collect some of the cells from your cervix and then take them into a lab. And they do this without having to put in that metal thing in, that you would get with a pap smear. I don't know what that thing is called. I'm not really sure, but I'm sure you can Google it. But I think this is less invasive compared to a pap smear, and apparently it's a bit more accurate compared to pap smears, because it will detect the actual HPV itself, and it will detect if you have abnormal cells, whereas a pap smear will only detect if you have abnormal cells down there. So I feel like with a pap smear, it's not so good, because then it's kind of like, let's say maybe you have HPV, but then it hasn't caused, like the symptoms haven't developed yet, and then the pap smear doesn't detect it, then it could be easily missed. So now you could actually think, I don't have HPV, kanti. The pap smear just didn't pick up the cells that are abnormal because the cells haven't started yet being abnormal, So I think that's another thing that makes pap smears a little bit less accurate, because they kind of detect a problem when it's already happening, when there are already abnormalities, which for me, I think that's a little too late. So I think if I were to be going to see a doctor to try and test if I have HPV, or maybe I'm at risk for cervical cancer, I probably would opt for the LBC one, because at least that can also detect if you do have the virus itself, or not, So I think it is much more accurate because of that. But then for people like me that do not like that feel like opening your legs up for your gynecologist is a bit invasive and a bit uncomfortable, even though you guys open your legs up for other people. I digress. I think for people that feel like pap smears or LBCs are invasive, then they have now self-sampling kits. So essentially with self-sampling kits, what happens is that you can either order it online, or you can go to like your nearest lab, like laboratory. There are a lot of laboratories all over South Africa that do all these kinds of samples, Remember where you get your COVID test from? So those kinds of labs, I'm not going to mention them by name, but there are a lot of laboratories all over the country where you actually can go to the laboratory itself, and then you buy the self-sampling kit, and then essentially you get home and then you take the sample yourself from all the way up there from the vagina, and then after you're done, they give you instructions, a full list of instructions that you need to follow, and then after you're done, you put your sample into like a tube or something. I think it comes in with like some liquid, maybe, I don't know, like a whatever liquid for putting your sample in, and then you have to now take it. You can send it via mail if you want to, or you can actually physically take the sample yourself back. So it's not expensive. It's not cheap, but it's not expensive. So I think these range from like 400 rands to 1,400. So obviously if you're going to order it online yourself and then they mail it to you and then you mail it back, it's more expensive. But to get the cheaper option, then what you can do is actually go to like a lab that sells these self-sampling kits, and then you take the sample yourself, and then you take the sample to them, and then they analyze your sample for you, and they tell you what your results are afterwards. And then after that, you're sorted. So nice. That's great. But obviously, as you can tell, these methods have to do more with testing for HPV in people that have cervixes, or I don't know what the plural of cervix is. But essentially you would have to have a cervix for it. So far, there doesn't seem to be a method of testing for HPV for men. I'm not sure how they would do it. I'm sure they just like take a swab I think they do like a urine test. It's probably not very accurate. Or maybe they take a swab, just like around the penis and whatnot. And then they actually go and test this out. So I'm not really sure, but if you guys know how HPV can be tested in men, please let me know how that's done. Please put your comment in the comments below. So that someone else can actually find out about this, because men also get infected by HPV. And I think it's very important that they also, know how to get tested for it, or to check themselves should they need to. Then you would probably want to know, like, how could you avoid getting HPV, right? It's an STI, so condomize. But in saying condomize, what we need to remember is that there is a right and a wrong way of using condoms, you know? Like, use condoms correctly, how they are meant to be used. Don't use expired condoms and whatnot. But the thing with condoms and HPV is that they will reduce, but in general, condoms reduce your risk of getting infected or falling pregnant. They don't completely eradicate it. So with HPV, I think this is a bit more so, because what happens is that, like, yes, a condom will reduce your risk of getting HPV, but then also you must remember that there are certain areas of your genitals that a condom will not cover. So those areas are kind of susceptible to HPV. So that is another thing. And this brings me to my next point of saying, do not sleep around, guys. I know this sounds so anticlimactic, but honestly, like, yeah, you know, as much as you can, try not to sleep around. It's just not worth it. The streets doesn't have a lot of options that are decent, so there's no point, you know, like now. And the thing also about, like, if you sleep around, you could get different, like, multiple strains of HPV. Let's say you get strain 16 from Joshua, and tomorrow you are with Kenneth, and Kenneth gives you HPV strain 6, and tomorrow someone else gives you strain 48 of HPV. So it's just, it's not worth it, you know, it's just not worth it. But in using condoms as well, be mindful of it and make sure you use them correctly to try and reduce or lower your chances of contracting this disease. And yeah, another one is being in a mutually monogamous relationship. So what I mean by this is that have sex only with someone who is only having sex with you, you know? So if you're in a mutually monogamous relationship, what that means is, like, you are both being monogamous, not that one person is monogamous and the other one isn't. And I know for a fact and out of experience that that's something that you can't really control for. So yeah, and I think if you have the opportunity to get vaccinated, it's like, that would be ideal. So this actually takes me to the next point of the things you can do to avoid HPV is to get vaccinated. But the thing with the HPV vaccine is that currently the vaccine essentially is, the current available vaccines are prophylactic vaccines. Prophylactic meaning that, yeah, like, remember PrEP. So this is treatment, like, they sort of like, they only work before they work to prevent the disease. So if you already have had the disease, then they can't be prophylactic anymore. This, like, the same thing for PrEP. PrEP is prophylactic exposure for HIV. So after you have HIV, it doesn't make sense for you to take PrEP because you already have the virus. So the same thing goes for HPV vaccines. They are prophylactic. So ideally, they are best for people that are not yet sexually active, because if you're sexually active, there's a good chance that you've been exposed to HPV. So yeah, and what happens is that the vaccine is currently given to girls. It's only, well, through the government program. What the South African government does is it gives the HPV vaccine to girls that are between the ages of 9 and 15. So I think from the age of, like, well, from grade 4, and that's age 9 to 15, that's when you get the HPV vaccine. And I think the current vaccine that we have, it's called Cervarix, because there are 3 types of HPV vaccines, but I think through the government system, we only have the Cervarix vaccine. So the Cervarix vaccine, it protects you against 2 types of HPV strains. So this is HPV 16 and HPV 18. So remember, these are the strains that are high risk and that usually cause cervical cancer. And then there's a second type of HPV vaccine that's called Gardasil. Gardasil it's a quadrivalent vaccine. So it essentially protects you against 4 strains of HPV, hence the word quad. So 4 strains of HPV being the first 2 that I mentioned, so 16, 18, and the other 2 strains of HPV 6 and I think strain 6 and strain 11, the low risk ones. And then there's, like, the third type of HPV vaccine called Gardasil 9. This one is more broad acting, so it protects you against 9 different strains of HPV. So it's the first 4 vaccines strains that I've mentioned, and 5 more other strains of HPV that the vaccine will protect you from. Currently, I think South Africa only has, through the government system, I think they only have Cervarix, which protects against the 2 most high risk strains of HPV. And through the government school systems, it's given to girls only between the ages of 9 to 15. But they do say that you can get it also once you start being sexually active. But the problem with that is that the effectiveness of the vaccine goes down, because you have, like I mentioned, it's prophylactic. If you're sexually active, there's a high chance that you have been exposed to HPV. So therefore, the vaccine will be way, way less effective. But obviously, it also will depend on which strains of vaccine you've been exposed to, because there are more than 100, remember. So if you are lucky enough that maybe you were only exposed to strains of HPV that are not targeted by these vaccines, then you kind of like, okay, because then the vaccine will now protect you from the other strains, from those other strains that you haven't been exposed to. So yeah, so I know that after the age of 15, they can give you the vaccine, but you will have to pay out of pocket for that. You can get the vaccine, but you can only get the vaccine up until you're 26. And after 26, it's like, yeah, I don't know if it's that useful anymore. After 26, I think that 26 is the cutoff age for getting the HPV vaccine. But if you are maybe a 30-year-old virgin, there might be, I think look into it. I do know people that are virgins and are much older. So yeah, if you haven't yet had sexual intercourse and you're much older, I don't know if you would qualify, So I think it's worth looking into. Like, if I could go back in time, I would get the vaccine. Honestly, I would get the vaccine. It's just, it makes so much sense. So yeah, I think it's worth looking into. So guys, if you have a girl child, please try to get them vaccinated. And with boys as well, I don't think boys can get it free, at least not through the government system. The same with like people that are in private schools. You have to get it like either through a pharmacy or through your healthcare provider. Yeah, like so far they're free for young girls, and that are going to public schools and that are going to special needs schools. Another way to avoid HPV, it would be to like try and get routine tests. Like, it's worth trying to get like your regular HPV test, like try and actually get routine pap smears, so that if there is something that's wrong down there, it can be detected earlier and something can be done about it. Cervical cancer is not nice, or like other cancers. Cancer is just, it's a deadly, well, not deadly all the time, but it's just not a nice condition to live with, or for other people that would have to live with you, that also wouldn't be something that is worth experiencing, especially because it's preventable. So like, obviously through all of this, you can tell that sexual intercourse is like a primary cause or a primary factor for whether or not you contract HPV. They have also shown that for people that have other STIs, hence I mentioned the whole STI surge in Gauteng. Like, if you have other STIs, you're more likely to actually suffer from HPV or to actually get HPV, and for it to probably even like be persistent, and for you to maybe like struggle to clear it out of your system. So yeah, like for instance with HIV people, as I mentioned earlier in my video, that if you're HIV positive, it can be very difficult for you to, because you're immune compromised, chances are that you're not always immune compromised, but like chances are that you might have a bit of an issue with fighting off the infection if you are HIV positive. And another one is if you have bacterial vaginosis. If you haven't watched my video on bacterial vaginosis, what it is and how you can avoid it, please watch the video. I've linked it up here. So yeah, they've shown that bacterial vaginosis seems to go hand in hand with HPV as well. So it's very important to take care of yourself overall, because then it prevents all these other issues from coming up and causing problems for you. So why did I create this video? So the whole point behind this video was to, like, for one, like once you're sexually active, you more likely are going to be exposed to HPV. So it's quite important to actually know how you can prevent it and some of the steps that you can take to protect yourself. And another reason is that we live in a country where rape is such a big issue. Young girls, adolescent girls, young women are being raped every single day in this country. So I think it's very important, especially if you're a parent and you have a girl child, it's important to have this kind of information on hand, so that at least you can do something in your power to sort of like try to protect them from the after effects of that should it happen. Not that I wish for that to happen to anyone, because that's it's cruel. So yeah, it's just to equip you with information that you can have on hand to take preventative measures, right? And take whatever you can take into your own control and help yourself, essentially. So that was essentially the whole point of this. And as mentioned, because HPV tends to coexist with other STIs, like considering the current STI surge in Gauteng, it's important to understand that sometimes, we may laugh about these things and think, oh, you just have gonorrhea or this, but you forget what it could do for you, the other implications of having the STI, that actually that predisposes you, or that increases your odds of acquiring another STI that you normally wouldn't have acquired if you didn't have any STI in the first place, So yeah, those are the reasons why I wanted to share this information with you. And as always, the videos on my channel are intended to be educational and to not substitute medical advice. If you require medical advice, please speak to a registered medical practitioner so that they can come up with a tailored plan for your situation, your health, and your health issues. So guys, thank you so much for getting to the end of my video. If you found this video informative, please like, and if you think someone else would actually really appreciate it as well and could learn from it, please share it with them. And yeah, I will see you in the next video. Bye.